This kid, he's 12, he's hanging out with his older cousin. And older cousin is like, hey, come here, let me tell you about my time in the war. And so older cousin starts to tell these gruesome stories about some of the things he did back in the Vietnam War. About people he had unalived and women he had done horrible things to. Like unspeakable things that I can't even describe on this app, otherwise my video will get removed. But then, to prove it, he busts out some Polaroid photos to show younger cousin. And most of these photos are of women. And they are absolutely brutal. And strangely, little cousin, he isn't grossed out. Actually, he's fascinated. And about a year later, the cousins are together again. And the younger cousin, his name's Ricardo, and the older cousin, his name's Mike. And so Ricardo and Mike, they're hanging out at Mike's place, and Mike, he suddenly gets into an argument with his wife. And he gets so mad that he pulls out a pew-pew, and he ends up unaliving her. Right there in front of little Ricardo. And again, Ricardo isn't grossed out. He's fascinated. Now, you can decide whether all that actually messed him up or not. Because shortly after that, Ricardo starts getting into drugs. Particularly the kind that make you hallucinate. And he starts committing petty crimes and shoplifting all the time. And he gets really into his religion. And eventually, he just says fuck it and he drops out of high school. A few years later, Ricardo's 17 and he gets a job at a local Holiday Inn. And while he's working his shift, he starts sneaking into the guests' rooms while they're asleep. And he'll steal their valuables. But then he goes even further and he starts trying to SA some of the guests. And he eventually gets caught and bam, they fire him. Oh, but it gets much worse. About 5 years later, Ricardo is 22 and he moves from Texas to San Francisco to get a fresh start. But instead of getting a job, he spends most of his time just doing drugs. And he basically just gives up on hygiene. Like the only thing he eats are junk food and soda. And he never brushes his teeth, so they inevitably start to rot. So he's just a stank ass at this point. And after about 2 years of living this stank ass lifestyle, Ricardo suddenly decides, you know what? I'm gonna start